On June 22, 2006, U.S. Army First Lieutenant Ehren Watada refused deployment to the Iraq War. As a result, he faced court-martial and up to 6 years imprisonment. His reason for refusing to serve was that he came to the belief that the war is an illegal act, and his continued participation would itself be illegal. His defense for the trial was centered on presenting testimony that supports this view. However, weeks before the trial, the military judge declared that all such evidence would not be admissible. His many supporters held a citizens' hearing on the legality of U.S. action in Iraq to present to the American public the testimony that was not allowed in the trial. This video contains highlights of that hearing.
There is a burgeoning support network among the high-profile resistors to the Iraq War. Camilo Mejia, who I said is here tonight, Pablo Paredes, who I think wanted to be here but could not. I think he's helping his fellow resistor back in San Diego. Aiden Delgado, Jeremy Hinsman, Kevin Benderman, and Ehren Watada, as well as many others, have refused orders to fight in Iraq, claiming the war is illegal. Since the invasion of Kuwait 11 to 12 years before Operation Iraqi Freedom, Iraq had not invaded any country, and Iraq was not a threat to any country, including the United States. Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction, and that was clear. Many weapons inspectors said that at the time. There was no link between 9/11 and Saddam Hussein's regime, or al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein's regime. There was no imminent threat of any attack against the United States or any other member of the United Nations, and therefore I said it was not carried out in self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Furthermore, I told the judge that the Security Council did not sanction the United States' use of force in Iraq. In fact, this is what I said, just before the invasion of Iraq, the United States tried mightily to get the Security Council to pass a resolution authorizing the war, but they refused to do it. I explained that Pablo had a reasonable belief that transporting Marines to Iraq would put them in the position of committing war crimes. The U.S. War Crimes Statute defines grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions as war crimes. Torture, inhuman treatment, willful killing, and the denial of a right to a fair trial constitute grave breaches and therefore war crimes. The torture and abuse of prisoners at Abu Ghraib in Iraq by U.S. forces constitute war crimes, beginning with the shock and awe of the first dropping of the 2,000-pound bombs on civilian areas constituted willful killing and a war crime under Geneva. The forced deportation of 200,000 citizens of Fallujah and the retaliatory attack on Fallujah and the destruction of a hospital also amounted to war crimes. As the war continues with no end in sight, and in fact it's getting more and more brutal and deadly every day, and casualties mount, the new GI movement will play a critical role in ending this war and in swelling the numbers of conscientious objectors. For all of them, unlike for many of us in America, the war is not an abstraction.
Now, in April of '04, we lost 135 soldiers, mostly in Baghdad and the Al-Anbar province. Until last December, it was the month that the most soldiers died in Iraq. And the more soldiers we lost in April, the more drastic our procedures came, as the other soldiers testified yesterday. And our procedures went, if you're fired upon, you hunker down and you wait for orders to fire back. But in April, the more soldiers that died, they said, if you're fired upon in a public place, shoot everybody that is there. And this is the procedures that came directly from the top. And every time we're in the market and one bullet would fly at us, we would open fire and bodies would drop. And this is a direct war crime. But you can't blame the soldiers because we're just following orders. First incident that I experienced firsthand was we were under attack guarding an Iraqi police station in Ottomia, Baghdad. And we lost a few soldiers that night, so we were all pretty jumped and amped for battle. But as the night went on and the quieter it got, we were dealing with people trying to escape Baghdad. And we had thrown out chem lights and said, this is our safety perimeter. If anybody comes to this perimeter, it is our procedure to open fire. Now, cars were coming, and we had about 15 guys pointing weapons and 50 caliber machine guns and everything, and we turned them away. We turned away 3 cars. Fourth car comes and doesn't stop. It goes through our safety perimeter and comes to a stop in front of my position, and sparks fly from the brakes. But in my mind, I'm thinking of the first 3 cars, and this car doesn't look like it poses a threat. And I hear my superiors yelling at me, what am I doing? And I'm screaming, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. And the windows roll down, and I'm looking at 2 kids in the back seat of this car, and the mother and father in the front. And my superior comes to me and says, what are you doing? You know our procedure. And I said, well, as a family, I did the right thing. And he said, no, you didn't. Next time you'll fire or you'll be punished. And it's in this thing that you cannot refuse these orders. You will kill innocent people. So all this happens in Iraq. And I come back. It's obvious we committed war crimes. It's obvious we did a lot of wrong things. But still, I'm a soldier. And I start to think about, if I'm presented war crimes, it is my duty to refuse. And from my experience in Iraq, I believe there was no way I could go back to Iraq, follow procedures without killing innocent people, committing war crimes, and eventually myself getting to the point to where I commit massacres, because enough of my friends had died. And I realized that it was my duty as a soldier to refuse this illegal war, and it was my right as a human being to choose not to kill innocent people. And I went AWOL from the military, and I spent 2 years in exile, and I came back and I turned myself in at Fort Knox in October, and I said, court-martial me, put me on trial, put my uniform on, and I'll tell you about the war crimes you committed. Because I'm not politically anti-war. I didn't go to Canada to talk about politics. I went to talk about war crimes. I wasn't anti-war. We committed war crimes. Doesn't matter. And so the military of Fort Knox did not court-martial me and let me go, which just validates even more that I witnessed war crimes and we committed war crimes and that I was not wrong for going AWOL.
This platoon used to have brain matter from people that they've killed. From 50 cows. They used to grab brain matter and they'd bring it back onto the base and put it in the refrigerator. You know, stuff like that. And they were literally, you know, they went crazy. And I know this isn't an isolated incident. I mean, this happens every day in Iraq. The thing is that, you know, the news doesn't catch it because it's really dangerous over there. And you know, no one's going to confess to these things unless if they're caught. And yeah, the rules of engagement basically got so bad in Iraq that if you did get engaged, you know, AK or anything, a shot from a direction, you just opened up on the city. And the day that I got wounded, we went in reaction to this same platoon. They were in the marketplace, the souk, and they just had 1 or 2 like pop-offs from an AK, and they just completely opened up on the whole market. And I remember driving, you know, because we were in the Humvees, driving through, and we, you know, post in the position, you know, we're just checking out the area, and I remember just seeing bodies on the sidewalks and broken glass and blood everywhere. It's difficult, you know, when you see things like that. I mean, I saw this, it was a really beautiful Iraqi family. They were caught up in the middle of an engagement. The Mujahideen, they went and attacked a convoy, and there's, you know, Iraqis, you know, trying to live a normal life because they can't over there. Just walking down the street, and a Marine just completely mowed down one family, the complete family, all of them. And there's a family right next to them, and this 13-year-old girl was shot in the stomach. And her mother was shot 2 times in the leg. And this is from 50 cal. And I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a really long, it's a big bullet, and the exit wound is huge. The Iraqi people have been suffering way longer than this current war. A lot of people don't remember, but more than 1.5 million Iraqi kids have died since the sanctions placed in Iraq due to the Clinton administration. And a lot of those people are still suffering from it. I mean, I met a lot of families that would show me their kids that were dying from leukemia because they didn't have the medicine to help them out. And
our orders come from up, but the environment of being at war for a year and 4 months is what breeds war crimes. If I didn't go AWOL, I would be on my 3rd tour in Iraq right now. You don't go to war for 3 years and then come back and get a job, work in the community. You just can't do it. I mean, I told Ehren, I said, Ehren, you get out of prison, but you don't come back from Iraq. No matter how much you're going to go through, and no matter how much people say, whatever, you've made the better decision. Your life will be better because of this.
Iraq can be thought of by those who have invaded it as literally a pimple of oil that has yet to be plucked. Iraq has definitely the 3rd, possibly the 2nd, some think the 1st, largest reserves of oil in the world. However, of its 80 known oil fields, only 17 have even begun to be developed. It is, in the words of the Environmental Information Agency, a bonanza in waiting. I'm going to fast forward through a lot of information on the post-war planning and jump right to December 2002, with the first meeting of the U.S. State Department's Future of Iraq Oil and Energy Working Group. While most of the State Department's Future of Iraq work was ultimately scrapped for not sharing the imperial zeal of the neoconservatives dominating the White House, the opposite is the case for the plans related to Iraq's oil. The Oil and Energy Working Group prepared a post-invasion plan for Iraq's oil system that would transform Iraq's nationalized oil system to one that was all but privatized and opened to foreign corporate investment using contracts known as production sharing agreements. Fast forward again, 2 months prior to the invasion of Iraq, when another set of plans was prepared, this time not just for Iraq's oil infrastructure, but for Iraq's entire economy. Like so much in the Bush administration, the actual writing of this plan was contracted out to a private company. In this case, Bearing Point. Bearing Point's plan, entitled Economic Recovery, Reform, and Sustained Growth in Iraq, draws straight from the economic playbooks of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the World Trade Organization, the North American Free Trade Agreement, and others. It transforms Iraq from a state-controlled economy to one that would function in support of, beyond all else, the presence of foreign multinational corporations. Not only would the Bush administration fail to meet the conditions of Article 43 and Provision 363 in Iraq, it would directly contradict them by radically altering Iraq's laws to serve its own purposes. In June 2005, 2 years after the occupation began, the transitional Iraqi government pleaded to the world from the opening pages of its National Development Strategy document, quote, "We urgently need emergency humanitarian interventions to provide basic services such as water, electricity, hospitals, and schools. The Bush administration failed to provide these necessities because it did not focus its efforts on the immediate provision of needs, but rather on the opening of Iraq to U.S. corporations and the advancement of its own agenda. Paul Bremer was administrator of the CPA for 14 months. During that period, he implemented 100 orders. He did so simply with the stroke of his pen. Those 100 orders had the full force of law, all but a handful of which exist today. There are two things that we must do to stop this clearly illegal motivation for launching a war. One, the occupation must end. It is the only way to remove the foreign pressure on the Iraqi government while it's making this critical decision over will it hand over its oil to the United States or not. No. We must do everything we can to stop the occupation. On the corporations, there's three very simple demands we can make. One, all the existing contracts must be canceled. Two, they must return all their misspent funds. Three, all of that money and a lot more must go to Iraqi companies and Iraqi workers for the reconstruction. Thank you very much.
So for the specifics, 340 tons of depleted uranium dropped in southern Iraq and Kuwait. 2,000 tons on record this time used. It is an independent reason, if there's no other reason on the planet, as you continue to ask us, sir, these environmental crises, this global warming situation we have that is undeniable, if there's one independent reason you need for that guy not to get on a ship and go somewhere, or not to get on a boat and go somewhere, or a car, or a plane, or a bicycle, it's because if you go anywhere in the Middle East, you're sucking up radioactive dust. The highway of death, which runs from Basra to Baghdad, it's the only way into Baghdad. The only way in. This is what we witnessed in 1991. 340 tons of depleted uranium leveled during the 45-day period. They're going to tell us that it was the most victorious ground war in all of history. Bullshit. We were so incompetent, we couldn't get to our intended target, which was Baghdad. Believe me, the 24th Infantry Division had no intentions of making a right hook into Kuwait. We couldn't get to Baghdad because of wadis, W-A-D-I. In the Webster's Dictionary, it's defined as a free-flowing river in Arabia, meaning our vehicles were sinking in quicksand. So we hung a right to go to the highway. That's how we ran into the highway of death. The highway where the United States military bombed a retreating convoy of civilians and military people with depleted uranium. The soldiers became so sick and so toxic that we had to get the hell out of the area. We were returning through King Khalid Military Center and soldiers were staring off into space. Now as a medic, I can't tell you that I was everywhere on the front line. I wasn't. I was with my particular unit. But I saw these guys coming through King Khalid Military Center that were just staring off into space. Now as a medic, one of the things you're trained to look at is the 1,000-yard stare. You Vietnam veterans know what I'm talking about, that 1,000-yard stare where they're just looking off onto planet Mars. I'm thinking as a medic, these guys must have been in some battle that was so horrendous. That's the only thing I can isolate. It's my job to conserve the health and welfare of the troops. What's wrong with this guy? I didn't know. It took me years to figure it out. Since that time, soldiers have died from multiple things. They've said they've died from skin-eating viruses. They said they've died from smoking too many cigarettes, and all kinds of other variables. But the fact of the matter is that depleted uranium, and in my testimony in Hamburg, Germany in 2003, and in my testimony in Japan just this past August on Hiroshima Day, I'm telling you, my testimony is basically all of the research that has been concluded by Iraqi doctors in the field, by doctors from Germany, is that depleted uranium and low-level radiation aberrates the chromosomes, alters the genetic makeup, alters the gene pool, contaminates the blood donor system, meaning these soldiers who get the uranium in their body, and they're the #1 blood donor program in the country right now. Red Cross loves them. You dig? So with this in mind, Lieutenant Watada shouldn't go anywhere, and no other soldier in the United States military should go anywhere, period.
I was at a research symposium at American University on November 28th, 2006. This was a public event, so I feel free to tell you the following. Charles Lutz, chief of the Combating WMD Division for the Deputy Directorate for the War on Terrorism of the Pentagon's Joint Staff, was in that position prior to the invasion. He said, first of all, prior to the war, he did not believe the U.S. had a case for WMD in Iraq. Secondly, he said if there had been WMD in Iraq, the United States did not have the ability to secure it. Planning had not been done to fulfill that function. That is incredibly well demonstrated by what happened at the Al-Tuwaitha nuclear facility. That's a complex of more than 100 buildings on a 35 square mile site located 12 miles south of Baghdad. Until 1991, it was the center of Iraq's nuclear weapons program. By the mid-1990s, the IAEA had confirmed dismantlement of the weapons program and removal from Iraq of stocks of nuclear material that could be used in weapons. However, other nuclear materials remained on site, including 500 tons of yellow cake uranium and a reported 4,000 radioactive sources, for example, X-ray machines. So U.S. troops arrived at Al-Tuwaitha in early April 2003, but failed to prevent ongoing looting or to accomplish thorough cleanup of surrounding populated areas. This became evident to the world when Greenpeace arrived for an investigation carried out from June 16th until July 4th, 2003. Some 500 barrels of yellow cake uranium had disappeared. Local Iraqis emptied the barrels and used them to hold drinking water and other items. They were later recovered through a buyback program. In June, the United States permitted the IAEA to survey previously declared nuclear material at Al-Tuwaitha at one part of the complex, but denied the IAEA permission to survey radioactive sources or to investigate contamination and health effects in the area. The 2000 Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference committed all countries party to that treaty, including the United States, and the United States approved these commitments, committed them to verified and irreversible reduction of nuclear weapons, a diminishing role of nuclear weapons in security policies, ratification of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. Is the United States in compliance with these obligations? No, it is not. First of all, the doctrinal expansion of options for use of nuclear weapons is contrary to the International Court of Justice opinion and to the commitment to reducing the role of nuclear weapons in security policies. The U.S. refuses to ratify the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. The U.S. is not implementing verified reductions of its forces in negotiations with Russia. The United States is not engaging in irreversible reductions of its forces as it committed to in the 2000 Review Conference. And that and all the other aspects that have been addressed in this tribunal are important to understand. But I think we also need to have a grip on this just monumental hypocrisy about nuclear weapons that forms a backdrop to the illegal U.S. invasion of Iraq. Thank you.
We all swear an oath to protect the integrity of the Constitution and the safety and the welfare of the American people. Sometimes that duty comes with a price, and I am just proud to say that I am more than willing to honor that sacrifice and that promise that I made to this country. It's very unfortunate that the judge has ruled that we will not be allowed, in my defense, to bring the arguments that you are going to hear today and tomorrow in a court of law. And from what I understand, that under military law, those in the military are allowed to refuse, in fact, have the right to refuse unlawful orders, a duty to refuse. And in a court of law, they should be given the opportunity to bring evidence and witnesses to their defense on how that order was unlawful. In this case, I will not be. And I believe that that is a travesty of justice, and that is a violation of our most sacred premises of due process, and indeed it is un-American. We will fight it. I will always fight. We will try to appeal to the highest court. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here, and I hope that the truth can be brought out to the American people. Thank you.
Back in San Diego, Aiden Delgado, Jeremy Hinsman, Kevin Benderman, and Ehren Watada, as well as many others, have refused orders to fight in Iraq, claiming the war is illegal. Since the invasion of Kuwait 11 to 12 years before Operation Iraqi Freedom, Iraq had not invaded any country, and Iraq was not a threat to any country, including the United States. Iraq did not have weapons of mass destruction, and that was clear. Many weapons inspectors said that at the time. There was no link between 9/11 and Saddam Hussein's regime, or al-Qaeda and Saddam Hussein's regime. There was no imminent.
On June 22, 2006, U.S. Army First Lieutenant Ehren Watada refused deployment to the Iraq War. As a result, he faced court-martial and up to 6 years imprisonment. His reason for refusing to serve was that he came to the belief that the war is an illegal act, and his continued participation would itself be illegal. His defense for the trial was centered on presenting testimony that supports this view. However, weeks before the trial, the military judge declared that all such evidence would not be admissible. His many supporters held a citizens' hearing on the legality of U.S. action in Iraq, to present to the American public the testimony that was not allowed in the trial. This video contains highlights of that hearing.
There is a burgeoning support network among the high-profile resistors to the Iraq War. Camilo Mejia, who I said is here tonight, Pablo Paredes, who I think wanted to be here but could not. I think he's helping his fellow resistors. And a threat of any attack against the United States or any other member of the United Nations, and therefore I said it was not carried out in self-defense under Article 51 of the United Nations Charter. Furthermore, I told the judge that the Security Council did not sanction the United States' use of force in Iraq. In fact, this is what I said, just before the invasion of Iraq, the United States tried mightily to get the Security Council to pass a resolution authorizing the war, but they refused to do it. I explained that Pablo had a reasonable belief that transporting Marines to Iraq would put them in the position of committing war crimes. The U.S. War Crimes Statute defines grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions as war crimes. Torture, inhuman treatment, willful killing, and the denial of a right to a fair trial constitute grave breaches and therefore war crimes. The torture and abuse of prisoners at Abu Ghraib in Iraq by U.S. forces constitute war crimes. Beginning with the shock and awe of the first dropping of the 2,000-pound bombs on civilian areas constituted willful killing and a war crime under Geneva. The forced deportation of 200,000 citizens of Fallujah and the retaliatory attack on Fallujah and the destruction of a hospital also